Hey guys, today I have a really cool guest on with me, Atsu. How's it going, Atsu?
よろしくお願いします。Atsu です。
We actually just filmed a video for Atsu's channel where we were each speaking our foreign language. Atsu's Japanese, so he was speaking English and I was speaking Japanese back to him. For this video, we're going to reverse it and we're going to both speak our native language. So if you want to hear me talk about how I learned Japanese in Japanese, definitely check that video. I'll put a link in the description. So yeah, one thing that I always wanted to debate you about a little bit is the Tangocho, because like we actually just talked about on your channel how Atsu has released a book that teaches Japanese people lots of words and phrases. And there's like, I mean, I haven't looked at it really closely, but it's, you know, there's a list of words that I'm assuming might be useful or might help you on a test, and then example sentences. And from my perspective, you know, anyone who watches my channel knows that I'm kind of like, well, why would you need that when you could just read a real book and then learn the words as they come up in there and have the example sentences be the real context that they showed up in. So what is your take on that?
My take ね。そうだな。じゃあちょっと2つ話したいことあるんだけど、1つ目は自分の出してる単語帳っていうのはそのテーマがあって、テーマっていうのはさっき言ったように自分はオーストラリアに行った時に自分がネイティブと違うっていうことを感じたっていうふうに言ったと思うんだけど、その違いの大きな要素は何だろうって考えた時に語彙っていうのがあったのね。で、その語彙っていうのは例えばネイティブがめちゃくちゃよく使うにもかかわらず日本ではあんまり勉強できなかった表現とか語彙っていうのがあったと。だから日本で習った単語っていうのはもちろんネイティブも使ったりとかすごい役に立ったんだけど、それでも日本ではなかなか出会わなかったけどネイティブがよく使うのがあった。例えば今 What's your take on that? って言ったじゃん。take っていうのは opinion って意味じゃん。だけど thought とか opinion とか。だけどこれ習わないんだよね、あんまり日本とかじゃ。で、そういうのをどんどん出会ってきたの、向こうで。で、もしこれが自分が日本にいるときに効率的に一気にいわゆる本一冊読むだけでこれぐらいの量読むだけでインストールできたらめちゃくちゃ効率がいいじゃんって思ったの。で、そうだからその take っていうのも入ってるんだけど、他にもいっぱいあるのは Mr. Boat とか You know, That ship has sailed とかなんかいっぱい向こうにいる中で普通にコンフェレンスとかでパートナーとかが That ship has sailed とか言ってで何言ってんのと思ってすぐ調べて、でも聞き取れるから一応調べてでその機会はもうないよとかねとかそういうのがあったから、まずその自分がもしこうだったらよかったなっていう昔あったらよかったなっていうのを今作ろうとしてるっていうのが一つあって、で、まあそれはまず自分の単語帳の話で、もうちょっとジェネラルになんで単語帳っていうのが自分はいいかって思うっていうと、これはもちろん、to each their own なんつうの、こう人による部分があると思うんだけど、自分の英語学習に対するアプローチってマットと少し違うのね。で、マットの日本語学習のアプローチっていうのはなんだろう、インダクティブなの。インダクティブって日本語でなんていうかわかんないんだけど、そのいわゆるリアルライフから取ってくる、そういうアプローチじゃん。だけど自分の英語学習のアプローチってその 2way だとは思うんだけど、英語学習どっちも大事だと思うんだけど、スタート地点はロジックとか理論なので、ラングエッジっていうのはその言語っていうのは生き物だから、いわゆるロジックで説明しきれない部分もたくさんあるし、理論が全てじゃない部分もあるんだけど、ゼロからまずは自分の伝えたいことを伝えられるようになるためには、一番早い、一番最小限の量でそこに行くには、理論っていうかそういうロジックでやる方がすごい早いと思ったの、自分は。だから言ってしまえば、コミュニケーションってさ、文章じゃん。コミュニケーションってさ、文章じゃん。Communication is made up of sentences. It's a sentence. でしょ。で、このセンテンスって何でできてるのって言ったら、ルールに従って単語が並んでるじゃん。で、ルールっていうのはグラマー、そう文法だから、文法を勉強しちゃって、単語さえ分かれば、自然じゃなかったとしても、コミュニケーションは取れるの。だから、 早く作れちゃうわけ。単語が頭に入ってて、ルール知ってて、発音が大体分かってたら、バババババババって単語並べて、ボーンって投げれば、ちょっと不自然だけど分かるっていう状態を作れるわけね。で、
Yeah, that makes sense.
そう。で、そうなった時に、やっぱり、その、本とか動画とかを見るのすごい重要だし、それも同時にやった方がいいと思うんだけど、それだとあまりに効率が悪い。いちいちノートを取って調べないといけない。だから、で、それができるフェーズっていうのは、ある程度基礎があってからだと思うよね。ある程度なんか7割、6割分かる状態で、4割抜けてくところを拾っていくみたいな。そういう感覚がある。そう。だけど、最初0から60まで持っていくときは、理論ベースでやった方がスピードが速いと思ってるの。そう。だから、俺はスピードを、実現するためには、単語帳みたいな、よく使うっていうふうにこう、誰かが厳選したものを、ふわーって覚えちゃった方が、不自然な文だったとしても、とりあえずコミュニケーションできる状態にする 60% を作るっていう意味で、effective and efficient って思ってる。そう。だから単語帳はなんか使い方を間違えなければいいのかなって思う。よくないのは結局英語学習、言語学習全部そうだけど、これが全てだと思ってしまうのがすごい危険なのね。だから英語学習10年してるのにずっと同じ学習してます。文法、単語とか読むだけとかね。ずっと同じことやって、それは違うと思う。そのやっぱりフェーズがあって、どのフェーズで何をすべきかっていう話で、それで、最初のフェーズっていうのは特にそういう学び方っていうのは、理にかなってんじゃないかなって思うって感じ。
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. Yeah, very good argument. I'm realizing now I was straw manning you a little bit in my head when I was thinking about this topic. But I think we have more overlap than maybe you realize because I actually also recommend people to do some traditional study right off the bat. Because yeah, if you just try to jump into the deep end, like you just say, hey, I'm just going to go and watch, like if a Japanese person was like, I'm just going to go watch an American movie knowing nothing about English. I'm just going to pick it up on the fly. Of course, that would be really inefficient. So I also recommend, just memorize the most common 2,000 words and read through a grammar guide and like learn the basics. I think the difference is that, like I talked about on your channel, my method is geared towards understanding first and then speaking later. And that changes a lot of things compared to if you're trying to learn how to speak and understand at the same time from the beginning. So I can see that if you were concerned with trying to build up a basic level of communication ability as soon as possible from the beginning, then it would make sense to kind of focus a little bit more on those logical elements of just like memorizing the formulas so that you can still, even if it's a little bit broken, communicate in some form. So I can see, yeah, that makes more sense. But then on my method, because we're focusing on comprehension first, there's a lot of the logic that you don't really need. There's the level of logic you need to produce is higher than the level of logic you need just to understand basic things.
本当にそう思う?
Yeah, I think so. Well, I can give you an example. So in Japanese, there's what we call the te form. I don't know how much you know about like Nihongo gakushu stuff. But so like for example, you have yomu and then yonde. And yonde is the te form. That was a bad example or like yaru, yatte. So if you want to be able to produce the te form, you have to memorize a lot of stuff. First of all, you have to memorize that there's like a certain number of different types of verbs, and then each type of verb conjugates a certain way, and it's like, okay, yaru, right? It's like, okay, the ru becomes the small tsu, and it's the te, yatte. And the formula is pretty complicated. Whereas if you just want to understand, you just have to know, okay, there's something called the te form. It kind of looks like this. It either is te or de. And that's it. You don't have to memorize the different types of verbs, the formula or anything.
But how do you know that it's the te that you've just talked about? Because there must be like all different sorts of te, maybe? I don't know.
Yeah, but I mean, you don't have to tell with 100% accuracy, but I mean, if it ends in either te or de,
then it's like
possibly,
pretty good.
Right.
Pretty good shot.
なるほどね。
And then, for example,
like when you're speaking Japanese, you don't know the logic behind how to conjugate into the te form, right? You just know it intuitively. And I'm the same way. I forgot the rule a long time ago. I just know it intuitively. So the goal in my method is you do learn some of the logical stuff in order to help speed up the process of learning to understand. And through learning to understand, you build up the intuition that allows you to speak
intuitively without having to think about it.
なるほど。じゃあ、なんかどちらかというと、頑張って、こう、感覚を磨いてから、後でその感覚を、そのロジックでコンファメーションするみたいな。なんだろうな、自分のセンスは合ってたんだみたいな言ってることわかるかな？
Well, I think when you're building up your comprehension, you always have a confirmation about whether you're on the right track or not, based on whether your interpretation makes sense. You know, like if you're listening to a conversation between two people and one of them says something that makes absolutely no sense and the other person reacts normally, then you probably misunderstood what they were saying, you know? And so you have this confirmation of whether you're on the right track or not. So I think just by getting lots of I mean, that's how we learn as infants, right? We get lots of input and then we're trying to match up the situation to what we heard and then basically figure out the patterns.
実際話すのは結構大事だよね。そういうコンファメーションを得るっていう意味では。
I think so for certain things, but for a lot of things, you can get the confirmation just based on whether you understand or not. Because if you have a misunderstanding, eventually you'll come across a situation where your interpretation doesn't make sense. And then that will tell you, oh, I must be understanding something.
そっか。
So,
なるほどね。そこは結構違いかもしれないね。
Oh,
自分はもう 100% 知ってれば、例えば、なんだろう、文法って理論を知ってると、理解できないときに、なんで理解できないのかっていうのはすごいわかりやすいと思うの。だって理論があって、そこからのズレなわけじゃん。理解できないのって。
yeah.
だからどうズレてんだろうっていうのが調べればわかるけど、なんかこう、理論がないと、ファファファファファファってなってて、なんか違った、なんでだろう、なんかわかんなかった、なんでだろうぐらいで終わっちゃう。その後の分析がしにくいっていうのが個人的にはあんまり好きじゃないの。だから、これ
I
は
see.
それプレファランスの問題だと思うけど、好みの問題だと思うけど、
Yeah, well, I could see that because a big part of my method is what I refer to as tolerating ambiguity.
Which means being okay with things
なるほどね。
being not clear.
うん、
Because I think there's a lot of things where, like, for example, there's a concept by Stephen Krashen, the linguist, called I+1, which basically says the most efficient way to learn is by coming across things that are only a little bit past your current level of knowledge.
So,
You know, if I'm at a certain level of English and I watch a 30-minute English TV show, there might be like 5 things in there that I didn't already know or hadn't already mastered, but as soon as I come across it, it like instantly makes sense because it's like I already have all the other surrounding puzzle pieces and it just fits in perfectly, you know? And so some people, like, for example, I bet a lot of Japanese people who study English, they're like, okay, I'm going to study using a drama. And they try to say, I'm going to learn every single thing in this drama until I can understand this one episode perfectly.
but that's really inefficient in my opinion because
Only like 5 of those things are going to be perfectly I+1 and the rest are going to be too far above your level. And you can like sit and like think about it like it's math and like do an analysis, as you're saying, and get it on an intellectual level, but it's not really going to be integrated into your direct intuition or your direct ability because it's too far ahead. It's too abstract, you know?
and so
I would say, well, actually, instead of watching one episode 10 times and trying to master it, watch 10 different episodes. And each episode, there'll be a couple things that you intuitively just pick up, like low-hanging fruit. It's less comfortable. It's more uncomfortable because you have to deal with the ambiguity.
but
It's actually more efficient, I think, because you're constantly picking up low-hanging fruit and you're not wasting your time on things that are too far above your level.
もうフルーツ高いところにしか残ってないもんね。下の全部取っちゃったら。
Yeah, but then you get taller. You
grow when you eat the fruit.
なる
So
ほどね。背が高くなると。それ食べて背
You
が
could say.
高くなる。なるほどね。そっかそっか。面白いね。だから違いはあるけど、だからその英語学習のアプローチもその日本語学習のアプローチも、まあ言語が違うから少し違いはあるかもしれないけど、まあアプローチって結構やっぱいろいろあって、その英語の勉強の仕方も自分みたいなすごいこう everything has to be on the dot みたいな人もいれば、なんか take it easy, let's go with the flow みたいな人もいるっていう感じだからそうでも結局たどり着きたいところは一緒で、そうだからその人に合った道をこういろんな人の話とかアプローチとか聞いて自分がしっくりくるものをやるっていうのは大事かもしれないね。
Yeah, I mean, ultimately, I think it's definitely true that learning a language takes a lot of time. And if you don't enjoy the process, then you're not going to do it. So more important than, I mean, we can argue about efficiency and things like that. But of course, at the end of the day, if you don't find something that works for you and that you like doing, then you're going to quit and then your efficiency is zero. So it doesn't really matter. And I also think that as you reach higher and higher levels, different approaches start to converge more and more. Because like, for example, when you're living on Australia and you're already fluent, but you're trying to bridge the gap between native level and where you're currently at, it really just comes down to living as much of your life as you can in the language, right? And really surrounding yourself with it and practicing, just getting in all the hours.
そうだね。結局最終的にはやるべきことって一緒なのかもね。最終的には。だけど、その最初にそれを持ってくるか、後に持ってくるかとか、そのシャッフルの仕方が違うってことかもしれない。だって結局例えば自分の英語もなんだろう、ロジックだけじゃ話してないじゃん。今も英語話すときって考えてないし別にそのアンコンシャスに話してるし、で自然な表現とかっていうのをそういう感みたいなその感覚っていうのも向こうに長く住んだりとか、英会話を毎日日本でもやったりとかしているところから生まれてくるものだと思うし、だからそれを最初からやるのか、ある程度そうファウンデーションできてからやるのかとか、そういう結局やんないといけないことは一緒で、順番をどう置くか、どのタイミングに指していくかっていうことなのかもしれない。
Yeah, no, I agree. I think that's pretty much how I view it as well. And we all have our own preferred way of structuring things. So, like, I imagine, you know, it depends a lot on your personality type, what method is going to be the most enjoyable to you. And so I imagine my audience is filled, I naturally attract people who resonate with my way of doing things. So I think sometimes, as you know, an online content creator, you can get the illusion that everybody is like you because your audience is like you. You attract the people like you.
You forget that there's other people that are, you
そう
know,
だね。
that feel pretty differently about things.
だからジグソーパズルをやってて、なんか俺は角からやりたいけど私は真ん中からやりたいみたいな、なんかそんな感じ。でも最終的にできる絵は一緒。
Yeah, yeah. That's a good metaphor. That's a really good analogy.
そんな感じかもしれないね。
Cool. Yeah, this has been super interesting to talk about. I've never really dove this deep before with a Japanese person about language learning methodology, so I'm really glad I got to. And to kind of just wrap it up, I think an interesting thing to kind of finish on is this is also the first time on YouTube that I've had this type of conversation where we're each speaking different languages. And for this one, I'm really glad that the one where we got really deep on the language learning philosophy was
In our native languages, because, you know,
you have to use your brain power on max to
have these conversations.
But I'm curious, how did it feel for you both ways? Each speaking our foreign language and each speaking our native language.
いや、日本語の方が簡単だね。
まあ、そうだよね。
マットはやっぱり英語で話す方が楽？
そりゃそうだよ。Yeah, of course. Well, yeah, this is probably a good place to wrap it up. Thanks you so much for the idea of doing the language swap because I think this was really fun, really interesting.
And maybe we can talk again sometime.
楽しみにしてます。
Cool. Well, yeah, thanks so much to all you guys who've watched this far and make sure to go and check out the video on Atsu's channel as well. Later, guys.
Bye bye.